PhD from University of Notre Dame, United States, America. I'd like to read his curriculum vitae briefly. Mun'im Sirri is Assistant Professor of Theology with additional responsibility for the Contending Modernities Research Project. He earned his PhD from the University of Chicago Divinity School. He did his undergraduate and graduate studies at the International Islamic University in Islamabad, Pakistan, and master's degree from the University of California, Los Angeles. His academic interests includes Quranic studies, interreligious relations, political theology, modern Islamic thought, and Southeast Asian religions and cultures. So I think we are ready for the presentation. If you have question later, please type it down in the room chat. Then we will discuss it in the question and answer session. To shorten the time, let's give it to Professor Mun'im Sirri, PhD. The time is respectfully yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wida, for the generous introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Hello everyone, good morning and thank you for joining us today, and it's nice to see you on Zoom. Let me first express my deepest gratitude to Director of UIN, Professor Haji M. Zainuddin, and also to the Dean of the Faculty Ilmu Tarbiyah and Kejuruan, Dr. Nur Ali, for their kind invitation. It's a real honor to participate in this 6th International Conference on Islamic Education. I should also congratulate the organizer of this conference on their hard work to bring together experts in the field of Islamic education to share their ideas and expertise, and also to organize discussion panels to address various aspects of Islamic education. I have been told that there are over 90 presenters, or more precisely 95 presenters, who will share their research today. I think that is a great achievement, so congratulations on that. I am humble and flattered to have this opportunity and to participate in this conference, to share the research that I'm working on, as well as to learn from other research and expertise. The topic of Islamic education is obviously beyond my training. I have been trained as a scholar of Islamic studies and theology, in Quranic exegesis, and in Islam and Christian-Muslim relations. So I'm certainly not an expert in Islamic education. However, I am currently working on a book project which I title Education, Youth and Radicalization, a book that is based on my extensive research on the phenomenon of student radicalization at both the university and high school level. In the past 2 years or so, I have been reading quite extensive literature on Islamic education in Indonesia. So when Dr. Nur Ali contacted me to participate in this conference on Islamic education, I happily welcomed the invitation, as I thought that this conference can be an excellent venue to share my readings of the Islamic education in Indonesia, as well as opportunity to learn from others. So with that spirit of learning from each other, I would like to reflect on Islamic education in modern Indonesia by highlighting what I consider as major challenges as well as opportunities and achievement. So here is my plan for today's discussion. I would like to highlight 3 major issues. What are the challenges facing Islamic education in Indonesia? What are the opportunities for the Islamic higher education or perguruan tinggi Islam to play its transformative role? And at the end of my presentation today, I would like to invite all of you to think together with me about the future trajectory of Islamic education in Indonesia. So I think I will speak for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then we will have some time for discussion. So before addressing major challenges and achievement, it might be a good idea to begin with a brief historical sketch to see how our Islamic education developed over a period of time. The Indonesian education system is immersed and diverse, with over 60 million students and 4 million teachers in over 300,000 educational institutions. Our educational system is the third largest in Asia and the fourth in the world, behind just China, India, and the United States. It is also one of the most complex systems of education in the world, as it involves 2 ministries or departments to manage the running of the education, namely the Ministry of Education and Culture and the Ministry of Religious Affairs. This dual system of education, namely the religious and general education, can be traced back to the colonial period when Indonesia was under the Dutch administration. The Dutch, as you know, introduced a Western type of education with focus on secular knowledge. In response to the introduction and the spread of Dutch schooling, Indonesian Muslims introduced the madrasah model in the early decade of the 20th century. So unlike the rest of the Muslim world, including India and especially the Arab Middle Eastern countries, the madrasah education in Indonesia is a relatively new institution. To contrast with the Dutch school system, the madrasah focus mainly on religious education. Today, madrasah education is not only owned by Muslim scholars as a private institution of learning, but it is also managed by the state as a public school, which include both religious and general knowledge. It should be noted, however, that before the introduction of the Dutch model, which was then responded by the establishment of madrasah, there was already a known institution of Islamic education in the country, known as pesantren or pondok or surau. This pesantren education has long history. Many scholars have argued that the pesantren or surau were pre-Islamic institutions that were adopted as an educational institution since the initial spread of Islam in the Indonesian archipelago. So there are few noticeable differences between the early pesantren education and madrasah, which I cannot go into detail because of for the sake of time. However, one thing is clear, that most pesantren today, if not all, have adopted the madrasah style of education with classical schooling in graded system with fixed curricula and also including both religious and non-religious subjects. This means that the pesantren system has been able to creatively adapt the demand of the modern society. So let me briefly highlight the history of Islamic higher education or perguruan tinggi. At the level of higher education too, we have both public and private institutions with either religious or non-religious education. Of the religious, or more precisely Islamic higher education, there are 3 types of institutions. One is Islamic universities or UIN, 2 Institute of Islamic Studies or IEIN, and the 3rd Islamic colleges or Sekolah Tinggi Agama Islam. The effort to create a system of Islamic higher education began in the final years of the colonial period, when Muslim leaders in Jakarta and West Sumatra attempted to establish small Islamic education known as Sekolah Tinggi Islam or STI, which was established in Yogyakarta, which then renamed as Universitas Indonesia or UII in March 1948. This university survived to these days. The establishment of STI or Sekolah Tinggi Islam was inaugurated by the first Vice President of Indonesia, Muhammad Hatta, at the time. And his speech, Muhammad Hatta called for inclusive education, that Islamic education should not only teach religious subjects, but also philosophy, history, and sociology to deepen and renew Muslim understanding of their religion. So Muhammad Hatta's inaugural speech illustrates that the ideas of pluralism, openness emphasized in the state Islamic university system or UIN today built on strong historical precedent. Notwithstanding the hope of Muslim leaders, the government's support to Islamic higher education during the first years of independence was quite minimal. It was only after 1960 that the government authorized the establishment of nationwide system of State Islamic Institute or IEIN. So the first institute was established in Jakarta, in Yogyakarta. However, the number of IEIN campuses grew quickly from only 3 IEIN in 1960 to 112 IEIN in 1973. So now, with that brief historical sketch, I can now highlight major challenges facing our Islamic education. And the first challenge presenting itself is certainly the complexity of the dual system. As the Islamic institution of learning, both public and private, adopt the national system of education, they are compelled to follow rules and regulations set up by both the Ministry of Religious Affairs and the Ministry of Education. Oftentimes, these regulations are so complex. And the second challenge is the increasing number of pesantren and madrasah graduates who pursue their studies at the university level. As more and more pesantren and madrasah meet the qualification of national education, the number of their graduates who are qualified for admission at the university, including UIN, increase significantly year by year. My data shows that in 2008, there were only about 4 million students, but in 2012, there were 6 million students. So within just 4 years, the number increased for about 2 million students. So the increasing number of enrollment certainly has something to be welcomed. However, it is also important to ensure that the quantitative growth does not occur at the expense of quality. So the key question is whether the university education system as a whole has been able not only to absorb the increase and influx of new students, but also to maintain the quality. So this leads us to the third challenges facing our Islamic education, which is the issue of high quality education. While it is true that Islamic higher education tends to perform better in the three dharma, in the teaching, research, and the service, but no Indonesian university today has been highly placed among the various rankings of the world universities. Of course, the transformation of IEIN to UIN is certainly a great achievement, However, there are a lot of things that need to improve to make our academic standing competitive at the international level. Many research findings show that our Islamic higher education is still lagging behind our neighboring countries. So the question that we may ask ourselves, how to enhance and develop the reputation of our university at the highest level. Fortunately, opportunities to improve the internationalization of our higher education are quite abundant. A number of Indonesian scholars, including myself, teach abroad who can serve as mediator to facilitate international collaboration and cooperation both at the individual and the institutional level. It is no secret that the internationalization of higher education is one of the most important tools for enhancing the quality and reputation of our university. Our law does not allow for establishing foreign universities in Indonesia, unlike Malaysia or Singapore, for instance, but there is no reason why internationalization network cannot be established. Before elaborating even further on the opportunities to establish internationalization of our education, let me mention one more challenge facing our education, which is connected to the question of quality, namely the lack of research culture. This is another huge issue. By research culture, I mean the way to evaluate, support, and reward quality in research and research activities. There is no question that the research culture shapes the way we do our research and the output. It also impacts the reputation of our institution. The low quality of research is affecting the recognition of our university as a research institution. The problem with the low quality of research is often connected with the low budget for the research. Just as illustration, the figure, as you can see from the screen, show how our research funding is far behind if we compare to other universities around the globe. So as you can see here, even if we compare our research budget with countries in Asia, we are still far behind those countries. So despite the daunting challenges that I just highlight, there are also important opportunities that should be highlighted and taken seriously. It is true that our research budget is extremely low, but the national budget on education is quite high. According to our constitution, the government is mandated to allocate at least 20% of the national budget to education. With this investment, it is expected that we should be able, at least in theory, 1, to increase access to education, 2, to improve the quality of teaching and training, and 3, to strengthen governance, management, and accountability. Another sign of good news is that the ability of our education to adapt and respond to the challenge of modernity by modernizing and reforming themselves. The Islamic education reform was first undertaken by the Ministry of Religious Affairs under the leadership of Professor Mokti Ali through a program of enhancing the faculty by sending senior lecturers to Western universities, especially Canada, the US, and Europe. At the center of this state reform was the introduction of non-dogmatic approach to Islam, including historical and sociological perspective. When Harun Nasution was appointed as director of IAIN in Jakarta, he wrote a book entitled Islam Ditinjau dari Berbagai Aspeknya, which was intended precisely to show that Islam is best approached from various perspectives, not from dogmatic perspective. Even more recent development, since 2003, students at IEIN system are required to take basic knowledge, basic course on democracy, civil society, or citizenship, known as Pendidikan Kewargaan. The impact of educational reform at IEIN has enormous, especially in the way that the graduate of IEIN and now UIN help, reform the Islamic education at the lower level, especially among the pesantren. So this is a survey taken in 1999, cited by Fuad Jabali and Jamharik in his book, which shows how the profile of educators in leading pesantren is changing as the result of the growth of IEIN system. Of the 130 pesantrens in 27 provinces that were surveyed in 1999, 20.8% of those pesantren were led by IEIN graduates, 27.7% led by graduate of state-sponsored school, including STAN and MAN, and only 11.5% led by graduate of Al-Azhar, and the same number by graduate of universities in Mecca and Medina. Among pesantren instructors or asatidh, the impact of IEIN and other state-sponsored schools is even stronger. As you can see here, 36.1% of teachers have graduated from IEIN and 25.9% from STAN or Aliyah, and only 3.5% of teachers in pesantren have graduated or studied at Al-Azhar, and about 6.4% have studied in Saudi Arabia. Now, the question is, what can we make of this statistic? One might argue that there is a significant shift taking place in the educational training of pesantren teachers away from Middle Eastern education toward the state Islamic educational system. Other people may disagree with this reading. However, no one can disagree on the tremendous influence of Islamic higher education on pesantren and madrasas. The graduate of IEIN, STAN or UIN today have played a very important role not only in the reform and modernization of pesantren and madrasa, but also in Muslim society as a whole. If you like, we can discuss later what makes this transformative role played by pesantren is possible. Now, with all of these challenges and achievement that I just highlight, the question now, where can we go from here? What will be the future of Islamic education in Indonesia? How to make our Islamic education competitive in the global market of education? How to improve our global reputation as academic institution? How to make UIN, for instance, world-class university as just highlighted by the director? What have we done or will do to accomplish just that? In the third part of my presentation, I will invite you to think together about this question: how to make or to achieve the status world-class university for our Islamic higher education. I'm certainly not futurist and I cannot predict the future. What I can offer to answer this question is to draw some lessons from the history of educational reform that seem to be useful to chart about the most viable option for the future of Islamic education in Indonesia. With no intention to downplay the role played by other factors, I would like to focus on two important figures who helped transform Islamic education in Indonesia, namely Professor Mokti Ali and Harun Nasution. Both of these figures were graduates from the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University in Canada. While Mukti Ali undertook reform within the Ministry of Religious Affairs, Harun Nasution through his leadership of IEIN in Jakarta. I would like to discuss the role played by these two figures within the context of what I call as the visionist approach to the study of Islam. Visionist scholars attempt to integrate Western academic method into their normative writing on Islamic reform and infuse Islamic principles and personal faith commitment into their academic research. So, fusionists combine Western critical method with religious commitment to reform Islam from within the tradition. Let me begin with Mukti Ali first. As you may know, that Mukti Ali earned his master's degree from the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill in 1957 with a thesis on Muhammadiyah. However, when he was at McGill, he saw deep interest in comparative religion, and he was the first person who established the first department of comparative religion at the IEIN in Yogyakarta. And he was later known as the father of comparative religion in Indonesia. Mukti Ali traveled to numerous places to study Islam, including to Mecca in Pakistan, but his meeting with Wilfred Cantwell Smith, the founder of the Islamic Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill, brought him to study Islam in Canada. So, Mukti Ali, as you know, was appointed as the Ministry of Religious Affairs in 1971. Since then, he began his reform agenda, including first the establishment of Litbang, or the Office of Religious Research and Development, in 1975. He appointed Mulyanto Sumardi to lead this research institution, which reflect how important research in the academic study of Islam. And as you might know, that Sumardi himself was Western educated scholar with PhD from Columbia and MA from Michigan University. The second reform agenda undertaken by Mukti Ali was to send a significant number of staff at the Ministry of Religious Affairs and IEIN instructors to pursue their graduate studies at Western universities, especially McGill. By the turn of the 21st century, approximately 200 Indonesian scholars have pursued their terminal master's or doctorate degree at McGill University, and 99 of them were IEIN lecturers. And an estimate 1,400 additional IEIN instructors and staff have received short-term training and teaching and research method. And the third reform undertaken by Mukti Ali was reorganizing the entire IEIN system by reducing IEIN campus from 13 campuses to only 13 IEIN in 1975. All the branches have been streamlined into their corresponding main campus. Thanks to this process, that the Ministry of Religious Affairs now had more centralized control over IEIN curriculum and also faculty. Now, let me say a few things about the kind of Islamic reform undertaken by Harun Nasution. Like Mukti Ali, Harun also graduated from McGill Institute of Islamic Studies. He obtained his PhD with dissertation on the place of reason in Abdus theology, which he obtained in 1968. In his dissertation, Harun Nasution compared Abdus' approach to the relationship between reason and revelation with the teaching of Ash'ari, Maturidi, and Mu'tazili. And he argued that Harun Nasution's approach to reason is closely aligned with Mu'tazilism, and he took a step further, arguing that the adoption of Mu'tazili thought is necessary for Islamic reform, and he himself claimed to be a proponent of new Mu'tazilism. Just like Mukti Ali, Harun Nasution also traveled to so many countries to study, but he was very much impressed by the way Islamic studies is conducted at the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill. In his memoir concerning the Institute of Islamic Studies McGill, he read the following: I realized that Islamic instruction within and outside Islam were quite different. Concerning McGill, he said that the lectures had dialogue. All courses were in seminar format. I genuinely felt the benefit. I not only received the lesson, but was engaged in understanding them. There, for the first time, I understand Islam viewed from its various perspectives. As you can see, that this last phrase inspired him to write a book entitled Islam ditinjau dari berbagai aspeknya. As you know, that in 1973, he was appointed by Mukti Ali as the new rector of IAIN in Jakarta. Since then, he introduced his reform, including the study of Islam and the introduction of academic study of this religion. Over the next 11 years, Harun built IAIN Jakarta into the foremost center of Islamic reform in Indonesia. Not only that Harun is known for disseminating academic method, he was also known as a keynote in the emerging alternative network that connect Indonesian Muslims to Western academia. He used his professional authority to encourage students to pursue higher religious education in the West by underscoring the benefit of studying at Western universities to strengthen their credential. When he was asked by reporters why Muslims should study Islam in the West, why not go to Al-Azhar, his response was that even Al-Azhar lecturers prefer to study in the West. Now, with this rule undertaken by Mukti Ali and Harun Nasution, the question now: what lesson can we learn from the kind of educational reform undertaken by Mukti Ali and Harun Nasution? Now, I can think of three important lessons that we can learn from them. The first lesson is the introduction of critical method to study of Islam, either historical, sociological, or anthropological, which is crucial. What makes the field of Islamic studies in the West today reach the age of vibrancy and dynamism is because Islam is no longer approached from dogmatic perspective. Islam is studied not only from the dogmatic perspective, but also from various academic method. Islam is not an exception. If other religions, like Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, are subjected to rigorous academic study, so also Islam. So the dogmatic approach to Islam will only render this religion irrelevant. And thus, Islamic education in Indonesia, in my humble view, must be open to the challenge of critical thinking. I think UIN should take the lead to equip students with sophisticated skill and knowledge that they need to flourish in their rapidly modernizing society. The second lesson that we can learn is that the future of Islamic education in Indonesia cannot be imagined without strengthening their ties with Western universities. The influence of Western universities, as we learn from the reform initiated by Harun Nasution and Mukti Ali, in the process of reform is so profound, more than what we imagine. So as we know that Mukti Ali and Harun Nasution studied in the West, when the Islamic studies there has not yet developed into what we witness today. How Moti Ali and Harun Nasution would say, if they lived today in time when Islamic studies in the West has emerged as one of the most vibrant field of research and academic study. The third lesson that we can learn is that although there were objections and opposition to the educational reform initiated by Moti Ali and Harun Nasution, but at the end of the day, the winner is a fusionist vision that rejects the border between Western academia and modern Islamic education. Fusionism rests on the assertion that knowledge cannot be divided into either Islamic or Western intellectual tradition, but rather it is unified. Fusionist thinkers like Moti Ali and Harun Nasution recognize no borders. They push beyond their effort to combat dualism between the West and the East by seeking to merge academic research method into their Islamic faith commitment. They insist that pious Muslims can produce high-quality academic research on Islam, and that Western academic scholarship can strengthen Islam as a religion. I will conclude by saying that the future of Islamic education in Indonesia will be at the hand of those people with this kind of visionist vision, and not with the people who build the wall between the East and the West, between Western academic study and Islamic academic study. So with that, I will conclude, and now I turn over to the moderator. And thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your discussion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.